How to add entity framework existing DB with Designer to a WPF app and use MVVM. This is brought to you by .NET developer Adam Spencer. Well, if I need more time on this important diagram, I'll just take it. So to clear up any confusion, the three entity framework approaches: code first, model first, which basically just means you get the designer, and database first. You can have database exist is what we're going to choose, and also, but we'll choose a template database exists with the empty designer. So that's what I'm adding onto this diagram to show you. And so there are three approaches: code first, model first, and database first. But there are four template choices. So to clear up confusion. For the MVVM part of this, which would be the next actual video, this is adding the entity framework in. We won't have any code behind here. I'm just moving the windows around to make them visually more useful. So for entity framework, we need to manage, right click our project, manage NuGet packages, type in entity framework, and we're going to get entity framework 6, not entity framework core, because this is WPF. Core would be for UWP and others. Okay, and of course the latest stable you want to choose. So that package is installed, and just removing. There's no law against having code behind, but it's it does happen. But my videos with MVVM, there will not be any code behind. Okay, so now what I'm showing you on the left side of the screen is our database, the PRS, EF designer, DFS for database first. Playsets and users tables we're going to work with, mainly the playsets. So I'm just showing you on the left is the SQL Server Object Explorer, just to kind of to make connections between the actual database and its objects, views, store procedures, tables, particularly ours, that we chose the entity framework for our data access layer. Now, to be honest and fair with you, I'm new at making video how-tos for software, so I used to be a corporate trainer with IT, so everything was in person. So explaining what I do, it's just part of my makeup, and I think that's important in IT learning. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here is I'm just getting my computer name and just copying it to my clipboard. So when we go through the wizard, it won't let you out of it, and if you don't know your server name, we've all been there. Okay, so you right click your project, new, and then data, and ADO.NET data model. We name this PRS underscore model. We just have to name it something. PRS Personal Readiness System. It's not actually a thing, it's just something I work on or design. Okay, this is important. Wizard or no wizard, it makes no difference. Well, it can make a difference, but alright, just undo what I said. The bottom line is that although there's three approaches, we see four templates, and we're choosing the first one. And you can rewind and go to that diagram template for the decision of what approach that you're going to take. And then when you get here, database first if you already have it, code first if you have the code, not the database, or model first. Pretty much if you have neither. So from the model, you can make your entity classes, and then it'll generate the database. Okay, so here we go with our connection string. New connection. This is up to you, however you want to connect to it, but there we go. My server, and as I try to make connections. There's a database. That's why we're choosing it. That's the one we're going to be working with. This how-to video / workshop. I do highlight as success is certainly in the details with most things, but definitely IT. Is to really make connections with things, especially anytime you're dealing with connection strings. Sometimes you'll go to run something and some type of. A lot of times it's security. It might be environmental, but things that you need to fix or change or adjust. But especially with Entity Framework, basically I'm just saying, take a look at the details. Okay, here are our objects. We're mainly going to be working with the playsets table, but we also bring in user. But you can, of course, have views and store procedures. And table value functions, etc. would be complex objects in Entity Framework's mind. So I forget to here, but the goal here is to make connections between the user table and the playsets table on the actual database on the left, and what we are choosing as database first, what we are choosing for it to generate both the code, the model code, like it'll be playset .cs and user.cs, because we're going to select those two. And this, of course, is entity data model wizard, and that's where pluralization or singular. We're going to leave the defaults. If you have any reason to not leave the defaults, you can change them. And I forgot to check the two, so what we want to check is playsets. That's the one we're going to be using the most, and users. Finish. Okay, I'm circling around there to show you that that's where it's going to show up, your Entity Framework, your model based on the template that you chose. Okay, and always references things that may or may not added in. Entity Framework certainly uses system.data. Now right there in the middle, that's your designer. Anytime you choose designer, and designer is very helpful. I'm just moving it vertical so you can see more in the windows. But here we want to make connections. We chose those two tables from the database. Remember, database already exists. Playsets and users. And Scholar property, that maps to a single column. So playset name, as a fully notifying property, C#, that same thing or maps to a Scholar or Scalar, however you want to pronounce it, property in the Entity Framework world. And with the properties window up on the right side, you can click on the tables, i.e. entities, and the columns, and see the differences. And on the left is our actual database, so you don't have to, whatever database you're using, in this case SQL Server, you don't have to have SQL Server Management Studio open and be toggling back and forth. I think it's faster, and it's a good idea just to open it up through Visual Studios. That's my preference. In this video, there's not enough time for me to explain every single thing, quite obviously, but plenty. And this is just to show you that it uses T4 code generation. They're TT files, which creates TT files, but in the entity framework, that on top, it a lot of the files, it'll be in green, and it'll say automatically generated code. Well, there we go, that's what it's doing. It's just generating code for us. So for example, you see just above where it's highlighted on the right, playset models, playset CS, that's what the T4, the code generation, that's what it's doing. It's generating the code for us based on database objects into C#. For using VB.NET, it would do to VB.NET. But there are our two data models as far as their class file representation. And there's a DB context. That's what what kind of glues everything together. And that's what tables, in this case, or objects or tables, look like. But DB context is something you need to reference, and that's at times certainly modify. Okay, here I'm just moving a few things around. Our database connection string goes into app.config if you ever need to change that. It's certainly a good idea to look at it and see the configuration sections that were added when you added in Entity Framework. And what I'm trying to do here is just make a connection between the representations of everything, the entities being the tables. I mean, the far left, we actually have the database itself. So when we're programming, we're adding, deleting, we can hit refresh, and and we can see right there that it's happening correctly, for example, and lots of other information. The very in the Solution Explorer, the .edmx file, that is that's an XML file. But if you're curious, which do you click on when you want the visual design representation? You click on that, the very top node. You double click on that, double left click on that. Playset. And on the left is DB context, and you can see the two tables. There's our connection string, which is in the, it's going to look for connection information in our app config file under connection strings and Entity Framework. That one I didn't mean to open. I was trying to go to definition. I thought that might bring up the app config file, the database connection, but we'll just manually go into it. Here I'm just making so everything is visible on one screen. And there's our navigation property, scalar property, primary key. The generator made it a short data type instead of a int6 small int, which was a database for the column data type for playset ID. The primary key is small int. In C#, that's equivalent to a short, as you can see it did. Okay, so basically, I'm just trying to get you to show, show you the connections here. We've already done what we needed to do to add entity framework. Based on the approach that we need, we already had our database, but we wanted the model designer, so we chose the existing database template. Here I'm just making the file visible, so in the future when I have two windows open, because it's easier to, or three or more windows open, it's just easier to see and make connections. So I'm trying to make everything visible. So there we go. Okay, that's the name of the actual name of the connection string that we want to use. Entity framework, there's 3 different files that make up the metadata needed for entity framework. More exploration if you want to learn more about that. That would be a whole nother video, but so in summary, okay, here's a few slides just to take the time to read. If you want. Entity framework. It's my great spelling with no spell checker. Wow, if my spell checker could see me now. I wouldn't put these in if I didn't find them important and things that I had some confusion with in the beginning. So you may too. Clear things up. Indeed, thank you. In Austin, Texas, downtown.